I saw the sparkle in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, thought she was being discreet as she added that strange powder to my champagne glass during my party, commemorating 40 years with the company. At 68 years old, and with $22 million in the bank from the sale of my empire, I was just one obstacle standing between her and the luxurious life she so desperately wanted. When no one was looking, I swapped our glasses. 2 hours later, she was the one who collapsed on the ballroom floor, convulsing, while I watched with a calmness that would frighten anyone. But before I go on, check if you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments. Where are you watching from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Eleanor Vance. I built my natural cosmetics company from scratch after the death of my husband 15 years ago. Ryan, our only son, always showed more interest in the fruits of my labor than in the labor itself. I don't blame him completely. Perhaps I was the one who spoiled him too much after he lost his father. The party was being held in the most elegant ballroom in Scottsdale. Ryan insisted the occasion deserved a celebration. "Mom, you built an empire. You have to celebrate it properly." I agreed, although I would have preferred something more intimate. When I announced the sale of the company 3 weeks earlier, I noticed something change in his and Chloe's eyes. Suddenly, they were more present, more attentive. Chloe supervised every detail of the party personally. Something unheard of for someone who considered household chores beneath her. Whenever I went to their house, the housekeepers were running around trying to please the lady of the house, while Chloe barely looked up from her cell phone to greet them. But now, there she was, arranging flowers, checking the guest list, and personally choosing the champagne to be served. She was radiant that night, in her expensive red dress bought with the credit card I paid for. Her blonde hair, perfectly styled, framed a face that many would consider beautiful, if not for the calculating look I had learned to recognize over the years. I noticed her whispering something to Ryan occasionally, and they both watched me from a distance. It was during the main toast that it happened. The ballroom was packed with friends, former employees, and business partners who came to celebrate my career. Chloe approached the beverage table when she thought no one was watching. With a quick, precise movement, she pulled a small, dark glass vial from her purse and poured the contents into the glass that had a small mark, the same one she had set aside for me earlier, with a tiny, almost imperceptible scratch on the base. Years of managing a company taught me to observe details. No one survives in the business world by being naive. You learn to notice when a supplier is trying to deceive you, when an employee is lying about results, when a competitor is planning to sabotage you, and you certainly learn to notice when someone is trying to poison you at your own party. I continued chatting with my former partners as if nothing had happened, but I kept my eyes on the glass. Chloe filled it with the most expensive champagne we had bought for the occasion, a French vintage that cost more than what most people make in a month. The golden liquid bubbled innocently, revealing nothing of what it hid. When Chloe approached, all smiles, offering me the prepared drink, I thanked her with an equally false smile. "To the most incredible woman I know," she said, raising her own glass. A true inspiration. Her tone was so convincing that if I hadn't witnessed her actions moments before, I might have believed the sincerity of her words. How many times had she praised me like that, all while planning to get rid of me? How many times had Ryan nodded silently, waiting for the moment my fortune would be theirs? "Thank you, darling," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. "It's a blessing to have you and Ryan by my side at this special moment." I brought the glass to my lips but only pretended to drink. The liquid barely touched my mouth before I lowered the glass again. Chloe seemed satisfied, believing her plan was in motion. I waited for her to get distracted in a conversation with an important guest. That's when I swapped the glasses. With the dexterity acquired from decades of tense negotiations, I put mine in the spot where she had left hers, and I took hers for myself, pretending to drink, but only wetting my lips. The minutes dragged on as I watched Chloe discreetly. She circulated the room with the confidence of someone who believes they have everything under control. She laughed, chatted, charmed the guests. The perfect daughter-in-law, the ideal hostess. No one would imagine that beneath that elegant facade hid a woman capable of poisoning her own mother-in-law for money. Half an hour later, Chloe began to show signs of discomfort. At first, she just seemed uneasy, occasionally running a hand over her forehead, as if feeling slightly dizzy. Then, her face paled, and she leaned against a table, visibly stunned. Ryan ran to help her. "Are you okay, honey?" he asked, worried. "I don't know." "I feel strange," Chloe replied, before collapsing to the floor. Chaos erupted. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Guests formed a circle around her, while others moved away, frightened. Ryan knelt beside his wife, panicking. I watched everything with a calmness that, in retrospect, must have seemed strange to anyone paying attention. But no one was looking at me right then. All eyes were fixed on Chloe, who was now shaking uncontrollably, a white foam beginning to form at the corners of her mouth. I knelt beside her too, playing the role of the concerned mother-in-law. "What happened? Does she have a medical condition?" "No," Ryan murmured, pale. "She's perfectly healthy." I noticed a look of confusion on his face, followed by a flash of understanding and horror. It was only for a second, but it was enough. He knew. Maybe he hadn't actively planned it, but he knew about Chloe's plan. And now, seeing his wife on the floor, convulsing from the poison meant for me, the reality of what they had tried to do hit him with full force. When the ambulance arrived, I insisted on going with her. "She's like a daughter to me," I told the paramedics. I saw Ryan's expression waver between concern and a kind of cold calculation. He was trying to understand what had gone wrong, how his wife had ended up being the victim of her own plan. "Mom, you don't have to go. I'll go. Stay and take care of the guests." There was an urgency in his voice that had nothing to do with concern for the guests. He didn't want me to be present when the doctors diagnosed Chloe. He didn't want me to hear what might be revealed. "Don't be silly, Ryan. The guests will understand. Chloe is family." I got into the ambulance before he could protest again. During the ride to the hospital in Phoenix, I watched the paramedics working frantically to stabilize Chloe. They checked her vital signs, inserted an IV line, and administered some type of medication. One of them said something over the radio about possible poisoning, requesting the emergency team to be prepared. At the hospital, I stayed close enough to overhear the medical team's conversations. "Acute poisoning," the doctor said. "Possibly some kind of toxic plant. Digitalis, maybe, or oleander. We need toxicology screens immediately." Ryan remained in shock, checking his cell phone constantly, as if looking for answers or instructions. He seemed like a man divided, worried about his wife, but also clearly apprehensive about what would be discovered. Chloe was taken to the ICU, sedated, and with an uncertain prognosis. The doctors said the next 24 hours would be critical. I sat in the waiting room, planning my next steps. The situation had unfolded in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. I knew Chloe was a threat, but I didn't expect her to try something so drastic so quickly. "Miss Vance," the doctor called me, using my professional title. "Could I speak with you in private?" Ryan stood up instantly. "Anything about my wife can be said in my presence." "Of course," the doctor replied, looking at me as if asking for confirmation. I nodded slightly. "We found toxic levels of a compound similar to oleandrin in her system. It's an extremely dangerous cardiac glycoside, present in the plant known as oleander." "How did this happen?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Generally through ingestion. It's quite rare, almost always intentional," the doctor explained, choosing his words carefully. "This type of poisoning doesn't happen by accident. Someone would have to extract and process the compound and then administer it in some way." I saw Ryan's face turn even paler. "Are you suggesting someone poisoned my wife on purpose?" "I'm not suggesting anything, sir. Just reporting the medical facts. The police will likely have questions, as is protocol in cases of possible poisoning." The mention of the police made Ryan visibly flinch. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I knew well from his childhood, a sign of extreme anxiety. When the doctor left, Ryan turned to me, his eyes revealing a mix of fear and suspicion. "Mom, what's going on?" I kept my expression neutral. "How would I know, son? I'm just as shocked as you are." "You switched the glasses, didn't you?" he whispered, leaning in so no one else could hear. "I saw you put your glass on the table and pick up another one." "What are you talking about, Ryan?" "I think the stress is affecting your memory." He stared at me for a long time, as if trying to decipher what I knew. Finally, he pulled away and sat back down, burying his face in his hands. In that moment, he looked much older than his 37 years, carrying the weight of a conspiracy that had gone terribly wrong. That night, I went home alone while Ryan stayed at the hospital. As soon as I walked in, I went straight to my office and opened the wall safe. From it, I removed a folder containing all the financial documents related to Ryan and Chloe for the last 5 years. The numbers told an alarming story. Unpaid loans, maxed out credit cards, missed mortgage payments. The mansion where they lived, valued at almost $4 million, had 3 overlapping mortgages. The luxury cars, a BMW for Ryan and a Mercedes for Chloe, were still being financed with overdue payments. The international trips, the jewelry, the designer clothes, all of it had been built on a mountain of debt, and I, in my maternal naivete, had contributed to it. In 5 years, I had loaned them more than $3 million, without ever seeing a dime in return. Whenever Ryan came with a story about an investment opportunity he couldn't miss, or Chloe casually mentioned that her friend had bought a house in Miami Beach and how nice it would be for the family to have a similar getaway, I gave in. I called those amounts investments in their happiness, never loans, because that would seem vulgar. After all, what mother charges her own son interest? What mother-in-law demands a formal contract when her daughter-in-law needs help? But now, looking at those papers, I realized the extent of my mistake. I hadn't helped my son build a solid life. I had financed a facade, an illusion of prosperity that held up only as long as I continued to supply money. And when I announced the sale of the company, when they realized I would have a substantial amount in one lump sum, the idea of waiting for me to die naturally became unbearable. Why wait years, maybe decades, when they could have it all now? Why keep pretending to love and respect me when a little poison would solve the problem much more efficiently? My phone rang at 7 in the morning the next day. It was Ryan, his voice betraying exhaustion and worry. "Mom, Chloe is stable. The doctors managed to reverse the effects of the poison in time." "Thank God," I replied, relieved. Despite everything, I didn't want anyone's death. A severe lesson would be enough. The police are here. They're asking questions about the party, about who had access to the drinks. It's standard procedure, son. Tell the truth. We have nothing to hide. There was an awkward pause. "Mom, did you notice anything strange last night? Anyone suspicious near the drinks?" The irony of the question almost made me laugh. Ryan was trying to create an alternative narrative, some unknown person, some intruder who would have poisoned his wife for mysterious reasons. Anything to divert suspicion from the real plan. "No, dear. I was busy talking with the guests." "Why?" "No reason. I have to go. The detective wants to talk to me again." After hanging up, I began to prepare the second phase of my plan. The first had been to identify the threat and neutralize it. The second would be much more complex. Protect my assets and ensure that Ryan and Chloe never tried anything like this again. I called my lawyer, Gregory Stone, who had been handling my legal affairs for over 2 decades. He was a man of few words, meticulous, and absolutely loyal, qualities I valued enormously in the business world. "Gregory, we need to talk urgently. Today, if possible." "Did something happen, Eleanor?" he asked, obviously noticing the tension in my voice. "Yes, something that needs to be discussed in person." 3 hours later, I was in his office in downtown Phoenix, an elegant and discreet space with dark wood-paneled walls and shelves filled with legal books. I recounted the events of the previous night, without omitting any details. Gregory listened attentively, taking occasional notes, his face impassive as always. "Eleanor, this is extremely serious. Do we have concrete evidence?" I saw Chloe put something in my glass. The hospital tests confirmed oleandrin poisoning, and I have reason to believe my son was, at the very least, aware of the plan. Gregory sighed, adjusting his glasses. "The problem is proving intent. Without an analysis of what was left in that specific glass, it will be difficult to legally establish that it was an attempted homicide directed at you. I don't necessarily want to involve them with the police, Gregory. I want to protect my assets. I want to make sure that if something happens to me, whether by natural causes or not, my money doesn't end up in their hands." We spent the next 2 hours drafting a new will and a series of asset protection measures. We created a trust with specific clauses, redirected a large part of my fortune to charitable institutions, and established a modest stipend for Ryan, contingent on certain behavioral conditions. "Eleanor, one more thing," Gregory said as we were finishing. "Considering what happened, you should seriously think about your personal security. I can recommend a company specialized in high-end residential security systems. Please do. I want cameras, sensors, everything necessary. I also suggest you consider hiring a trusted personal assistant, someone who can be with you regularly, especially if Ryan and Chloe try to get close again." I nodded, already planning the steps I would take to ensure my safety. I had never been a paranoid person, but I had also never been the target of an assassination attempt before. The circumstances demanded prudence. As I left the office, I received a text from Ryan. "Mom, Chloe is awake. She's asking for you. Could you come to the hospital?" I replied that I would be there in 1 hour and drove home calmly, preparing myself mentally and emotionally for the confrontation to come. Soon, Ryan and Chloe would discover that messing with a woman who built an empire from scratch was the biggest mistake of their lives. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Ryan sitting in the hallway, with deep dark circles under his eyes and an unshaven beard. He looked like he hadn't slept at all in the last 24 hours. He stood up when he saw me and gave me a hug that seemed more for appearances than genuine affection. "How is she?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Better. The doctors said she was lucky. If the poison had been consumed in a larger quantity." He let the sentence hang in the air for a few seconds. He was clearly testing my reaction, trying to determine how much I knew. "It's wonderful it was just a scare. Can I see her?" Ryan nodded, guiding me to the room. Chloe was pale, with tubes connected to her arms and a heart monitor beeping regularly. Her blonde hair, always impeccably styled, was tangled and lifeless. Without makeup, she looked much younger and more vulnerable than the confident, manipulative woman I knew. Her eyes opened slightly when she saw me enter, and I noticed a brief flash of fear before she composed her expression. "Eleanor!" Her voice was hoarse. "I'm so glad you came." "Of course I came, dear. I was very worried about you." I sat in the chair next to the bed. "Did the doctors say what caused this?" Chloe and Ryan exchanged a quick glance. "They're still investigating," he replied, a little too quickly. "Probably an allergic reaction to something she ate or drank." "Strange," I commented. "You've never had allergies before. These things can develop over time." Chloe tried to smile, but the effect was more of a grimace. "The doctor said it might have been a preservative in the champagne, or maybe one of the appetizers." "Interesting," I murmured. "Especially since the toxicology tests identified oleandrin in your system. A rather specific compound, don't you think?" The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe turned even paler, if that was possible. Ryan froze, his expression flickering between shock and panic. "The most important thing is that you're okay," I said, placing my hand on hers. I felt her tense under my touch. "You know, Chloe, I've been thinking a lot since last night." "About what, Mom?" Ryan asked, clearly nervous. "About how fragile life is, how everything can change in an instant." I paused dramatically. "I've decided to make some changes to my will." The silence in the room was almost palpable. I could practically see the gears turning in their minds, calculating what this would mean for their future plans. "What kind of changes?" Ryan finally asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing drastic, just making sure my assets are distributed according to my true intentions." I stood up, adjusting my purse. "Chloe, dear, get plenty of rest." "Ryan, can we talk outside?" In the hallway, my son looked like he was about to fall apart. His face was tense, his eyes restless. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Mom, about those changes to the will." "Don't worry, son. I'm still going to take care of you." I smiled, knowing he would interpret that as a good sign, not perceiving the trap I was setting. "By the way, I think it would be good for you and Chloe to come stay with me for a few days after she's discharged. That big house, all by myself. And you could help me with some details of the company's transition." Ryan seemed momentarily relieved. "Of course, Mom, whatever you need." "Excellent. I'll go home now and get everything ready." I kissed his cheek and left, feeling his eyes following my every step. I drove to my house, a mansion in an exclusive Scottsdale neighborhood that I bought when the company started to prosper. It was too big for one person, I knew, but I had never been able to part with it. Every room held memories of happier times. When my husband was still alive, when Ryan was just a bright-eyed boy running down the halls, when I believed that professional success would bring complete happiness. The next morning, the security company arrived promptly at 8 in the morning. 3 technicians worked all day installing state-of-the-art cameras, motion sensors on all entrances, and a panic button system that would allow me to call the police immediately in case of an emergency. Miss Vance, this is one of the most sophisticated systems available on the market, the team leader explained, handing me a small device that looked like a watch. Keep this panic button with you at all times. If you press it 3 times in a row, it will send a silent alert to our central office and to the police. We've also installed cameras in all rooms except the bathrooms, of course. And as for the kitchen, especially the food preparation area, we've covered every possible angle. If anyone tries to add something to your food or drink, we'll have it recorded. Excellent. And can I access the footage remotely? Yes, ma'am. Everything will be available in real time through this app on your cell phone. It will also be stored on our servers for 30 days, in case you need to review anything later. In the afternoon, I received a visit from Gregory, bringing the finalized documents for my signature. Everything is ready, Eleanor. With these measures, your estate is protected even in the worst-case scenario. Thank you, Gregory. You've been extremely efficient, as always. There's one more thing. He hesitated. I did some preliminary research on Ryan and Chloe's finances, as you requested. The situation is worse than we imagined. He handed me a folder with a detailed report. In addition to the debts I already knew about, there were others hidden in shell companies, loans from loan sharks, and even a secret mortgage on the house I had given them as a wedding gift. They are practically bankrupt, Gregory concluded. If it weren't for your constant financial support, they probably would have lost everything months ago. And they still maintain that absurd lifestyle, I murmured, scanning the documents. Luxury cars, international trips, jewelry. There's something else you should know. Gregory looked uncomfortable. Ryan consulted another lawyer a few weeks ago, asking about the possibility of obtaining a conservatorship over you, alleging incapacity. He felt my blood run cold. He was planning to declare me incompetent? Apparently. The lawyer he consulted is known for, let's say, arranging convenient medical opinions, and we found regular payments to a geriatric psychiatrist, a Dr. Martin Fields. We don't have access to the medical records, of course, but it's suspicious, to say the least. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. It wasn't just about killing me. If that didn't work, they had a plan B. Declare me mentally incompetent and assume total control of my assets while I was still alive. Gregory, we need to expedite the implementation of all the measures we discussed, and I want to add a few more clauses to my will. When Ryan and Chloe arrived at my house 3 days later, they were visibly tense. Chloe still looked fragile, thinner than usual, leaning on Ryan as she climbed the front steps. She was dressed discreetly, almost soberly, a look I had never seen her wear before. "Mom, we brought our things as you suggested," Ryan said, forcing a smile. "Wonderful. I've prepared the guest room for you." I led them inside, noticing how their eyes scanned the house, probably mentally appraising the art objects and antiques that decorated the rooms. "Your house always impresses me, Eleanor," Chloe commented, stopping to admire a painting on the wall. "Is this an original?" "Yes, dear. I bought it directly from the artist almost 20 years ago. Before he became famous, of course. It must be worth a fortune today," she murmured, almost to herself. "The sentimental value is immeasurable," I replied, watching her disappointed expression. Clearly, she was more interested in the monetary value than the artistic or emotional meaning of the piece. During dinner, I kept the conversation light, asking about Chloe's recovery and making comments about former colleagues from the company. The food was prepared by Rosa, my trusted housekeeper for over a decade, and served only to them. Claiming a slight upset stomach, I only ate some soup I had set aside for myself earlier. "Aren't you joining us, Mom?" Ryan asked, watching as I took only a few sips of my soup. I don't have much of an appetite today. I think all the excitement of the last few days has affected my stomach. Chloe could barely hide her discomfort, playing with her food without really eating. Perhaps she feared I was giving her a taste of her own medicine. A completely understandable fear, considering her own actions. It was only when we were having coffee in the living room that I broached the subject that really mattered. You two, as you know, the sale of the company has left me in a very comfortable financial situation. I've been thinking about how to manage all of this. Ryan immediately perked up, sitting straighter. Mom, if you need help with investments or financial planning, we're here for you. Actually, I was thinking of something more definitive. I paused, watching their expressions. I'm considering moving into a luxury retirement community. A place where I'll have 24-hour medical assistance, social activities, and I won't have to worry about the upkeep of a big house like this. Chloe's eyes lit up. It was as if someone had turned on a light inside her. What a wonderful idea, Eleanor. There are incredible places, truly resorts for seniors. Exactly. I've already researched some options. The summit at Silverleaf seems perfect. I've heard of it, Ryan said, trying to hide his enthusiasm. It's one of the most exclusive in the country. And one of the most expensive, I added. The buy-in fee is $1.5 million, and there are significant monthly fees. But it's worth every penny for the peace of mind, Mom, Ryan hurried to say. And with the money from the sale of the company, that wouldn't be a problem, right? I watched his eyes glitter as he spoke of values. Money had always been his main interest, since he was young. When other children asked for bicycles or video games as gifts, Ryan wanted stocks or investment accounts. At the time, I interpreted that as precocious maturity. Now, I recognized it as obsession. It wouldn't be, but there's another detail. I kept my voice casual, as if discussing the dinner menu. The community requires that each resident establish a power of attorney for medical and financial emergencies. Someone who can make decisions in case the resident becomes incapacitated. I could almost see the adrenaline coursing through Ryan's veins. He shifted in his chair, unable to hide his excitement. It was like a hunter who finally spots his prey after hours of waiting. Well, as your only son, it would be natural for me to take on that responsibility. That's exactly what I thought. I smiled sweetly. Could you help me with all that paperwork? It's so complicated for me to deal with these legal issues. Chloe, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. It would be a pleasure, Eleanor. We can help you with everything. Of course, Mom. Ryan nearly jumped out of his chair with excitement. In fact, I know an excellent lawyer who can expedite all of that. I bet you do, I thought. Probably the same one you were consulting about how to declare me incompetent. That won't be necessary, dear. Gregory is already taking care of everything. He's prepared the power of attorney documents and scheduled a meeting with the community's management for next week. The mention of Gregory seemed to disappoint him momentarily, but he quickly regained his enthusiasm. Excellent, then. Can we accompany you to that meeting? That would be wonderful. Oh, and there's one last thing I'd like to discuss with you. I put my coffee cup down on the table. Considering this significant change in my life, I've decided to do a complete review of my will. Chloe, who had been quiet for some time, finally chimed in. What kind of review, Eleanor? There was a poorly disguised urgency in her voice. I imagined she was calculating how many of my jewels she could claim, what works of art she would sell first, what car she would buy with my money. Well, with the sale of the company and now this move to the community, I realized I need to reorganize my assets, ensure everything is in order for when I'm no longer here. Ryan and Chloe exchanged a look that said it all. They believed I was about to hand them everything on a silver platter. First, the power of attorney would give Ryan control over my finances while I was alive. Then, the will would ensure everything passed to them when I died. The perfect plan, with no need for poison or suspicion of murder. Just an old woman voluntarily ceding control of her life and fortune to her loving son and dedicated wife. That's very prudent, Mom, Ryan said, trying to sound serious and responsible. It's important to have everything organized. I think you two will be excellent guardians of my legacy, I commented, watching their faces light up with poorly concealed satisfaction. That night, As they settled into the guest room, I stayed in my office reviewing the documents Gregory had prepared. Everything was in order for the meeting next week, a meeting that would definitively change the course of our lives. Through the monitor connected to the security cameras, I watched Ryan and Chloe chatting animatedly in their room, gesturing and occasionally laughing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their expressions revealed everything. They were celebrating prematurely, counting the money that wasn't yet theirs, planning the life they would have at my expense. The week passed slowly. Ryan and Chloe behaved like perfect children, attentive, helpful, always asking if I needed anything. Chloe prepared my favorite tea every afternoon, made a point of accompanying me on short walks in the garden, asked about my memories as if she truly cared. Ryan, for his part, spent hours with me reviewing old company documents, feigning interest in my professional career, asking for investment advice as if he truly valued my opinion. It was a flawless performance. If I didn't know their true intentions, I might have been fooled by the affection and attention. Perhaps I would have believed that I finally had the son and daughter-in-law. I always wanted people who valued me for who I was, not for what I possessed. But the security monitors didn't lie. Every night, when they thought they were alone, they revealed their true faces, eagerly discussing what they would do with my money, which assets they would sell first, how they would manage their new fortune. The night before the meeting, I heard Chloe ask, "What if she changes her mind at the last minute? What if she decides not to sign?" "Don't worry," Ryan replied, with terrifying confidence. "I have a plan B. Dr. Fields is prepared to provide documentation, attesting to cognitive decline if necessary. 2 medical signatures. And we can request the conservatorship regardless of her wishes. Are you sure it will work?" Chloe's voice revealed anxiety. "She seems perfectly lucid to me. Trust me." At this age, it's easy to convince a judge that she's confused and making detrimental decisions, especially with the right medical history. The right medical history that they were fabricating behind my back. The confirmation that there were no limits to what they would do to get their hands on my money. I felt a mix of nausea and rage, hearing my own son plotting to declare me incompetent just to control my fortune. That night, I barely slept. I mentally reviewed every stage of my plan, making sure there were no loopholes, that everything was perfectly arranged for the final confrontation. On the morning of the long-awaited meeting, I woke up early and prepared myself carefully. I chose an elegant navy blue suit, discreet makeup, and pearl jewelry. The perfect image of the respectable lady everyone expected to see. I wanted to look exactly like the stereotype of the rich, naive old woman that Ryan and Chloe believed I was. They also dressed impeccably, he in a well-tailored suit, she in a modest dress that contrasted with her usual extravagant style. Their anxiety was almost palpable, manifesting in small, nervous gestures. Ryan constantly checking his watch, Chloe repeatedly touching up her lipstick. "Are you ready?" I asked, grabbing my purse. "Gregory will meet us there." The summit at Silverleaf was everything it promised to be. A luxurious complex set on spacious, wooded grounds, with impeccable gardens, first-class facilities, and attentive employees. The main lobby had a 2-story ceiling, marble floors, and furniture that looked like it came from a high-end design magazine. We were received in the meeting room by the manager, Miss Vasquez, a middle-aged woman with impeccable posture and a professional smile, and by Gregory, who was already waiting for us with a folder of documents. "Miss Vance, what a pleasure to meet you," said Miss Vasquez. "Mr. Stone told us about your interest in our community." "The pleasure is mine," I replied. "This is my son, Ryan, and my daughter-in-law, Chloe." After a brief institutional presentation, with photographs of the apartments, common areas, and medical facilities, Miss Vasquez addressed practical matters. "Our community requires, as part of the admission process, that all new residents establish a clear power of attorney for medical and financial matters, in addition to substantial financial guarantees." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "Mr. Stone has prepared all the necessary documentation." Gregory opened his folder and distributed the documents. Ryan immediately began to read the power of attorney, his eyes shining with anticipation as he examined each clause. "As you can see," Gregory explained, "the power of attorney establishes authority for decision-making in the event of Miss Vance's incapacity. Ryan smiled, barely containing his satisfaction. Chloe hid it better, maintaining an expression of solicitous concern. And as for the financial guarantees? Miss Vasquez asked. Here is a complete statement of Miss Vance's assets, Gregory replied, handing her another document. As you can see, there are more than enough resources to cover all anticipated expenses. Ryan and Chloe looked anxiously at the paper, which detailed all my assets and investments. I saw their eyes widen as they saw the numbers. The sale of the company had resulted in an even larger sum than they had imagined. Everything seems to be in order, Miss Vasquez said, satisfied. If Miss Vance is ready to sign the admission documents, we can proceed. Certainly, I replied. There's just one matter I'd like to clarify first. I turned to Ryan and Chloe. Did you read the power of attorney carefully? Ryan nodded enthusiastically. Yes, Mom. It's exactly what we discussed. I'll be your proxy for all necessary decisions. Excellent. And did you also review the financial statement? Yes, Chloe replied quickly. It all seems to be in order. Perfect, I smiled serenely. Now, before we sign, there's something I need to share with everyone. I paused, savoring the moment. Miss Vasquez, I'm actually not interested in becoming a resident of the summit at Silverleaf. The look of shock on Ryan and Chloe's faces was priceless. It was as if they had been hit by a bucket of cold water simultaneously. What? Ryan stammered. But Mom, I thought we had decided. No, dear, you decided. This meeting had another purpose. I turned to Miss Vasquez. I apologize for the inconvenience, but your presence here today was part of a social experiment, let's say. The manager looked confused, but Gregory intervened gently. Miss Vasquez, I appreciate your understanding. As we previously arranged, your institution will be compensated for the time dedicated to this meeting. What the hell is going on? Chloe demanded, her polite facade completely crumbling. What's going on, dear daughter-in-law, is that I'm teaching you a lesson. My voice was calm, but firm. The power of attorney that Ryan just read so eagerly is fake, as is the financial statement. Fake? Ryan looked stunned. Completely fake. My real assets are protected in irrevocable trusts established a week ago. Neither of you has access to them. Chloe's face turned red with rage. You can't do that. Not only can I, but I did. And there's more. I turned to Gregory, who removed another set of documents from the folder. This is my new will, duly registered and validated. Ryan will receive a modest monthly stipend, enough to live with dignity but nothing more. As for you, Chloe, you will receive absolutely nothing. That's insane. Chloe stood up, furious. Ryan, say something. My son seemed paralyzed, as if his world was crumbling before his eyes. Mom, why are you doing this to us? Why? I kept my voice controlled, despite the rage boiling inside me. Perhaps because my own daughter-in-law tried to poison me with oleandrin at my commemoration party. Perhaps because my own son was, at the very least, aware of the plan. Ryan turned pale. What are you talking about? I saw Chloe put the poison in my glass, Ryan. I swapped our drinks when no one was looking. That's why she was poisoned, not because of some mysterious allergic reaction. Miss Vasquez looked horrified, looking from me to Ryan and Chloe as if witnessing a particularly disturbing play. This is absurd, Chloe protested, but her voice was trembling. Ryan, she's crazy. This is exactly why we need the power of attorney, to protect her from herself. Interesting theory, Chloe. Gregory intervened calmly, placing another document on the table. This is the toxicology report from the hospital, confirming the presence of oleandrin in her system. And this, he added another paper, is an analysis of the remaining champagne from the party, showing traces of the same poison. That doesn't prove anything. Chloe was desperate now. Anyone could have contaminated the drink. Anyone with access to oleandrin and a motive to want me dead, I agree. Like someone who consulted websites about toxic plants in recent weeks. Your internet searches were very revealing, Chloe. She looked at Ryan, pleading. He seemed unable to speak. His face, a mask of shock and betrayal. There's one last thing you should know, I continued relentlessly. All of our conversations over the last few days were recorded. including that charming discussion you had in the guest room about how it would only be a matter of time until you had access to my money. I took the cell phone out of my pocket and played an excerpt from the conversation they had had the night before. Ryan explaining his plan B to declare me incompetent, mentioning Dr. Fields and the fabricated medical reports. "You can go now," I concluded. "Your bags have already been placed in your car. Don't come back to my house. The locks have been changed, and the security team has explicit instructions not to allow you entry." Ryan finally found his voice. "Mom, please. It was all a terrible misunderstanding. Chloe may have done something impulsive, but I never saved the speech, Ryan. You knew. Maybe you didn't actively plan it, but you knew. The evidence is all here." I handed him copies of the text messages Gregory had recovered, showing conversations between him and Chloe, discussing when the old woman finally kicks the bucket and how they would reorganize the finances after gaining access to my fortune. Miss Vasquez cleared her throat uncomfortably. "I believe I should step out and let you resolve your family matters." "That won't be necessary," I said, standing up. "We are finished here." I looked directly at my son and daughter-in-law. "You have 24 hours to get out of the house I bought for you. As of tomorrow, it will be officially for sale." "What?" Chloe practically screamed. "You can't do that. The house is in Ryan's name." Actually, Gregory intervened again. The deed remained in Miss Max's, Vance's name, with a co-tenancy agreement that she can terminate at any time. All perfectly legal. Ryan looked completely destroyed, alternating between looking at me with desperation and at Chloe with growing rage. "You," he started to say to her, but then he stopped, running his hands over his face. "Get out of my life," I said, with a calmness that didn't reflect the emotional storm inside me. "Maybe someday, when you learn the value of honest work, Ryan, we can rebuild something. But Chloe will never again be welcome anywhere near me." I walked out of the room without looking back, feeling a strange mix of triumph and profound sadness. Gregory accompanied me to the car, offering his arm for support. "Are you all right, Eleanor?" he asked with genuine concern. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and activities. I kept myself busy reorganizing my life, now free from Ryan and Chloe's manipulations. I hired a trusted personal assistant, Megan, a middle-aged woman with experience caring for high-level clients. She was not only efficient, but also became pleasant company, someone I could talk to without fear of ulterior motives. From a distance, I watched as the life Ryan and Chloe had built crumbled. The house was sold for less than it was worth, just to liquidate it quickly. The luxury cars were repossessed by the finance companies. Chloe's jewelry was sold to pay urgent debts. Ryan tried to call me countless times, alternating between desperate pleas and bitter accusations. I changed my number. Chloe, on the other hand, disappeared completely. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had returned to her hometown, abandoning Ryan in the process. In the midst of the chaos, I discovered an unexpected sense of freedom. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to worry about the needs or expectations of others. There was no company to manage, employees to supervise, a son to support financially. I could finally dedicate time to myself, to my own interests and desires. I started traveling, small trips around the country initially, then international adventures I had always postponed due to lack of time. I visited museums in Paris, cathedrals in Rome, markets in Marrakech. Each new experience seemed to wash away a little of the bitterness that recent events had left in my heart. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a handwritten letter. It was from Ryan, without the expensive stationery or scented paper he used to use. "Mom, I don't expect your forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. What we did, what I allowed to happen, is unforgivable." Chloe left. Our marriage ended a month ago, although in reality, it ended the moment you confronted us. I'm working now, a regular job at a construction company. For the first time in my life, I'm feeling what it means to earn my own living. It's humiliating and liberating at the same time. I discovered our house had 3 mortgages I didn't know about. Chloe took out loans in my name without telling me. I'm practically ruined financially, but strangely, I don't feel as bad as I expected. There's something honorable about working for your own things, something I never understood before. I'm not asking to come back into your life. I just wanted you to know that, despite everything, your lessons are finally being learned. Too late, I know. With regret, Ryan. I kept the letter in my office drawer. I didn't reply. It was still too soon for that. The wound of betrayal was too fresh, too open, but I kept it, nonetheless. The sale of the company and all the subsequent drama left me exhausted, but also strangely reinvigorated. At 68 years old, I was facing a new phase of life, free from the expectations and demands of an ungrateful son, free from the manipulations of a self-interested daughter-in-law, free to decide exactly how I wanted to live my remaining years. During one of my trips, I met Bernard, a 70-year-old French widower who was traveling alone through South America. We met on a vineyard tour in Napa Valley and discovered common interests: art, classical music, gastronomy. He was a retired engineer with kind eyes and an intelligent sense of humor that made me laugh genuinely. Something that hadn't happened in a long time. We exchanged emails after the tour, and soon we were chatting regularly. It wasn't a romance. We had both lived long enough to know that companionship and sincere friendship were much rarer and more valuable treasures. When he suggested meeting me in Lisbon to explore Portugal together, I accepted without hesitation. It was in Lisbon, sitting on the terrace of a cafe, that I received the call from Gregory. "Eleanor, how's Portugal?" "Wonderful, Gregory. I should have taken this trip years ago. I'm glad to hear that." He paused. "I have news about Ryan." My heart skipped a beat. "What happened?" "Nothing serious. In fact, it's good news, in a way. He's stable now. He got a job as a junior manager at a construction company. He's living in a modest apartment, paying off his debts little by little." I felt a lump in my throat. Despite everything, he was still my son. The little boy who held my hand on his first day of school. The teenager who hugged me tight when he won his first swimming competition. The young man who cried on my shoulder at his father's funeral. "That's good." He asked about you. Not directly to me, but to mutual friends. He wants to know if you're okay. I was silent for a few moments, watching the boats on the Tagus River. Bernard was in the bookstore across the street, probably looking for some rare book to add to his collection. "Tell him I am." "Just that? For now, yes." After hanging up, I sat for a long time, reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal still hurt, but the pain was no longer so sharp. In its place, there was a certain melancholy, and perhaps a small opening for forgiveness. "Not now, but one day." Bernard returned, carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "I found something for you," he said, with his distinct French accent. "A book about pioneering American businesswomen. I thought you might identify with some of them." I smiled, moved by the gesture. "Thank you, Bernard. That's very thoughtful of you. Is everything all right? You seem pensive." "Just some news from home. Nothing urgent." He nodded, not pressing for more details. One of the many things I appreciated about him. He knew how to respect others' space and silence. That night in my hotel room, I wrote a letter to Ryan. I didn't send it. I wasn't ready for that yet. But the simple act of putting my feelings on paper was therapeutic. "Dear son, the path we choose in life is made of small decisions. Each choice, seemingly insignificant, takes us in a direction. At some point, you took a detour that took you away not only from me, but from your own values. I built my company from scratch, after your father's death, not only to ensure our livelihood, but to teach you the value of work and perseverance. At some point, I failed as a mother, allowing you to believe you deserved wealth without effort, success without sacrifice. Life is now teaching you what I couldn't. I hope you are truly learning. I hope you are rediscovering the man your father and I dreamed you would become. Maybe, one day, we can talk again. Not like before, but as two adults with mutual respect and realistic expectations. Until then, know that, despite everything, you are still my son, your mother." I put the letter in my suitcase, promising myself to revisit it when time had softened the pain even more. Life went on. I traveled with Bernard for almost 2 months, exploring small Portuguese towns, Spanish beaches, Italian villages. When we said goodbye in Rome, it was with the promise to meet again in Paris the following summer. Back in the United States, I decided it was time to start completely fresh. I sold the mansion where I had lived for decades, with all its ghosts and bitter memories. I bought a smaller house, more suited to my needs, in a quiet coastal town in Santa Barbara. I invested part of the money from the company's sale into a fund for young female entrepreneurs. Women with innovative ideas, but without access to the capital needed to realize them. I became a mentor to some of them, sharing not only financial resources, but also the experience accumulated over decades in business. I found purpose in this new phase of life. I was no longer just the successful businesswoman, the betrayed mother, the lonely old woman. I was a woman who had a lot to offer, many stories to tell, much wisdom to share. 6 months after the confrontation, I received an email from Ryan. It was his 38th birthday, and for the first time in his adult life, he would be spending it alone. He didn't ask for anything, just shared a little about his current life. The job at the construction company, the small apartment he had managed to furnish on his own, the evening business classes he had started taking. I replied with a short message. Happy birthday, Ryan. I hope this new year brings you continued growth and self-discovery. I'm proud of the steps you're taking. It was a beginning, a small step toward whatever the future held for our relationship. As for Chloe, I never heard from her directly again. I learned through third parties that she had married again, this time to a significantly older man and, apparently, quite wealthy. Some people never change. 2 years after the poisoning incident, while organizing some books in my new library, I found the photo of Ryan as a child, smiling next to his father. Unexpected tears came to my eyes. Despite everything, I missed the boy he had been, the son I had loved unconditionally. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't planned to do so soon. I called him. Mom? His voice sounded incredulous when he answered. Hello, Ryan. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm back in California. I thought, maybe we could get a coffee sometime. There was a long silence. I would love that, Mom. We arranged to meet the following week at a neutral cafe, far from both my new house and his apartment. When the day came, I felt nervous as a teenager on a first date. What would we say to each other after everything? What would it be like to look into the eyes of the son who had conspired against me? He arrived punctually, dressed simply but neatly, jeans and a dress shirt, without the flashy accessories he used to show off. He looked thinner, older, but also more centered. Mom? He said, hesitant, clearly unsure whether he should hug me or not. I resolved the dilemma by extending my hand for a formal handshake. It hurt to do that with my own son, but it was necessary. We needed to establish new boundaries, start from scratch. We sat down and ordered coffee. The first few minutes were filled with superficial conversations about the weather, the city, trivialities. Then, finally, Ryan took a deep breath and addressed the elephant in the room. Mom, I know I'll probably never be able to apologize properly for what happened, but I want you to know that I am deeply sorry. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't regret it. I looked at him, trying to see beyond the surface, trying to see if the regret was genuine or just another manipulation. The Ryan I knew was an expert at saying what others wanted to hear, at appearing vulnerable when it served his purposes. Ryan, do you know what hurt me the most? It wasn't the attempt to poison me. It was discovering that my only son, the man I raised alone after his father's death, saw me only as an obstacle between him and the money he thought he deserved. He lowered his eyes, visibly ashamed. His hands trembled slightly as he held his coffee cup. He was thinner, with small worry lines around his eyes that weren't there 2 years ago. I got lost, Mom. I got lost in debt, in a lifestyle we couldn't afford, in Chloe's influence. I'm not trying to blame her for everything. I made my choices. But she had a power over me that I can't explain. Did you know she planned to kill me? I asked directly. The question that had tormented me for 2 years. He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he would lie again. But then I saw something change in his eyes, a decision, perhaps, to finally face the truth, however painful. Not in the way it happened, he replied, finally looking me in the eyes. I swear on everything that's holy. Chloe vaguely mentioned speeding things up. But I thought she was talking about getting the power of attorney, or maybe scaring you with some staged incident, so you would agree to move into the retirement community. I never imagined she would actually try to poison you. I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately wanted to believe that my son hadn't consciously conspired to kill me. And when she collapsed at the party, when it became clear it was poisoning, he hesitated again. I panicked. I knew something was terribly wrong. When the doctor mentioned poisoning, I looked at Chloe and I saw guilt in her eyes. In that moment, I knew she had done something horrible, but I was paralyzed, unable to process the reality, to admit to myself that my own wife had tried to kill my mother. And yet, you continued with the plan to put me under a conservatorship? To fabricate false medical reports? His face flushed with shame. I didn't know what to do. Chloe insisted it was the only way out of debt. She said you were getting confused, that it would be better for everyone if we took control before you made impulsive decisions. I convinced myself that, somehow, we were protecting you. Protecting me? I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. Ryan, did you really believe that? Or did you just convince yourself of it because it was convenient? He didn't answer immediately. His silence was a more honest confession than any words could be. How is your life now? I finally asked, changing the subject. His face lit up slightly, seeming relieved by the change of topic. Better than I deserve. The job at the construction firm is going well. I was recently promoted to project coordinator. It's nothing compared to the lifestyle we had before. But, before? When you were living off borrowed money and waiting for my death? I interrupted, more harshly than I intended. He flinched, as if my words were a physical blow. Yes, I'm sorry. He took a deep breath and continued. I'm saving up to maybe open my own business one day. Something small, manageable, honest. I realized I have some talent for interior design. I'm taking a night course. That's unexpected, I commented, genuinely surprised. Ryan had never shown an interest in design before. It was always the financial aspect of business that attracted him. I discovered it by chance. When I moved into the apartment, I had no money for a decorator, so I had to do it all myself. Friends started to compliment it, then asked for help with their own spaces. I realized I like creating environments, working with colors and textures. I'm proud of you, Ryan. The words came out naturally, and I realized they were true. You're finally discovering who you are, without defining yourself just by money or status. He smiled shyly, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the boy he had been. Thanks, Mom. That means a lot to me. And what about Chloe? Are you in contact? His expression hardened. No. After you confronted us at the community, she tried to convince me it had all been a misunderstanding. When she realized I was finally seeing the truth, she just packed her bags and disappeared. She left a note saying she deserved better. The last I heard, she married a businessman in the hotel industry, a man almost 80 years old. I'm sorry you went through that, I said, surprising myself with the sincerity of those words. Don't be. It's what had to happen. I needed to lose everything to understand what really matters. We were silent for a few minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. The coffee had gone cold. The people around us came and went, oblivious to the drama unfolding at our table. How has your life been, Mom? Ryan finally asked. You look good. Different. I am good. I sold the mansion. Bought a smaller house on the beach. I've been traveling, meeting new people, finding new passions. I'm happy for you. He seemed sincere. You deserve peace after everything we went through. After everything you put me through, I thought, but I didn't say it. There was no need to reopen wounds that were just beginning to scar. I created a foundation for young female entrepreneurs, I told him. Women with innovative ideas, but without access to capital or mentorship. It's been rewarding to see the projects grow. That's incredible, Mom. I always admired your business acumen and your generosity. Generosity that he and Chloe had tried to exploit to the very end, I thought. But again, I kept the thought to myself. We didn't promise each other anything that day. We didn't talk about forgiveness or reconciliation. We just agreed to meet again in a few weeks. One step at a time, rebuilding not what we had before that was irrevocably lost, but something new, based on honesty and mutual respect. When we said goodbye, I allowed a brief hug. It was strange and familiar at the same time, comforting and painful. Part of me wanted to hold him like when he was a child, to protect him from the world and his own wrong choices. Another part remained cautious, the wounds of betrayal still too fresh. Back at my house by the sea, I sat on the terrace watching the ocean. The waves broke on the beach in a constant, soothing rhythm, a reminder that the world kept turning, regardless of our small personal tragedies. I called Bernard, who had returned to France. Our regular phone calls had become an anchor in my new routine. "How was the meeting with your son?" he asked, after we exchanged the usual pleasantries. "Better than I expected, harder than I imagined," I replied honestly. "He seems changed, more mature perhaps, but I still don't know if I can trust him again." "Trust is like fine china," Bernard said, with his deep voice and marked French accent. "Once broken, it can be repaired, but the cracks will always be there. The question is whether you can appreciate the piece even with its imperfections." "You always have a perfect analogy, don't you?" I replied with a smile. "It's the privilege of age. You accumulate metaphors like others accumulate trinkets." We laughed together, and I felt a wave of gratitude for having found this new friend in a phase of life when many resign themselves to loneliness. In the days that followed, I reflected a lot on Ryan and the future of our relationship. Life had taught me a hard lesson about trust and betrayal, about how the people we love most can hurt us deeply. But it also taught me about resilience, about the capacity to start over, about the transformative power of forgiveness, not necessarily for the other person, but for our own peace of mind. A week after our meeting, I received a text message from Ryan. He had attached photos of a small design project he had done for a coworker, the renovation of a tiny apartment on a limited budget. The result was surprisingly elegant, combining pieces found in thrift stores with custom-made elements. This was my first paid job as a designer. It wasn't much, but it was honestly earned. "I thought you might like to see it," I replied immediately. "It's truly impressive, Ryan. You have talent. Congratulations on this first step." It was a small gesture, but significant. He wanted to share something genuine with me, something he had created with his own hands and mind, not with my money or connections. We began to exchange occasional messages, nothing too deep, just updates about our days, small achievements, random thoughts. Gradually, the messages became more frequent, more personal. A month after our first meeting, we saw each other again. This time, Ryan invited me to visit his apartment. It was a small place, but cozy, decorated with creativity and good taste. Nothing there resembled the flashy style that he and Chloe used to cultivate. There were no luxury goods, expensive art, or designer furniture. Instead, there were personal items, old photographs in restored frames, an armchair clearly bought at a thrift store and reupholstered, colorful cushions made with fabrics he had chosen himself. An apartment that spoke of someone who was discovering their own style, not just copying what design magazines dictated as elegant or sophisticated. "It's not much," he said, clearly nervous about my assessment, "but it's honest. Everything here was bought with money I earned or restored with my own hands. It's a beautiful space, Ryan. It reflects who you're becoming." We had tea on the small balcony overlooking a park. It was a pleasant afternoon without the tensions of our first meeting. As I was about to leave, Ryan handed me a package wrapped in brown craft paper. "What is this?" I asked, surprised. "Open it when you get home," he replied, with a hesitant smile. That night, sitting in my living room, I carefully opened the package. Inside was a photo album. It wasn't new. I recognized it immediately as one of the old albums we kept at the mansion. I was sure they had all been packed away and stored during the move. Opening the album, I found photos of Ryan as a child. Him on the beach, building sandcastles with his father. Him on his first day of school, with a backpack almost bigger than himself. Him blowing out candles on birthday cakes, year after year, growing up before my eyes as I turned the pages. On the last page, there was a recent photo I didn't recognize. Ryan sitting on his balcony, looking at the horizon, with a thoughtful expression. And underneath it, a note. "Mom, I found this album when I was helping with the move from the mansion. I kept it because I needed to remember who I was. Before the money, before Chloe, before all the wrong choices. I needed to remember that I was once that boy you loved unconditionally, and who loved you the same way. I can't change the past. I can't undo the pain I caused. But I promise that, from here on out, I will try to be someone you can be proud of again. With love, Ryan. Tears rolled down my face as I closed the album. It was such a simple gesture, but so powerful. A recognition of our shared past, a bridge to a possible future. At 70 years old, I was starting a new chapter. I couldn't say exactly how it would end, but I was determined to write it on my own terms, with wisdom acquired through pain and overcoming. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my friend Clara, one of the few people who stood by me through the whole whirlwind of the last few years. "Eleanor, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "Remember that adult literacy project I told you about? We need volunteers with business experience to help with the administrative side." "I'm listening," I replied, intrigued. It would only be 2 times a week, a few hours, but it would make a huge difference. We have no organizational structure, and someone with your experience would be a blessing. Many of our students are older women, returning to their studies after raising their children. They would be inspired by someone like you. "Tell me when and where," I interrupted, feeling an unexpected wave of enthusiasm. "I'm in." I hung up the phone with a smile on my lips. Maybe this was what I needed. To use my skills to make a difference in other people's lives. To build a legacy based on generosity, and not on material wealth. The next day, visiting the project's headquarters, I felt energized in a way I hadn't experienced since the early days of my company. The place was simple, even precarious. A borrowed room in a community center with donated furniture and old equipment. But there was a contagious spirit of purpose and hope. Clara introduced me to the team, mostly volunteer teachers and a few overworked administrative employees. Everyone seemed genuinely relieved and excited at the prospect of having someone with my experience helping to organize the operational side of the project. There was a lot of work to do, systems to implement, volunteers to coordinate. It was a challenge, and I always loved challenges. I felt useful in a way I hadn't felt in years. During an initial meeting, one of the coordinators mentioned that they urgently needed a new space. The rent on the current one was increasing, and they didn't have the resources to cover it. "How much would it cost to buy a place of your own?" I asked. She mentioned an amount that, for me, represented an almost insignificant fraction of my assets, but for them, it seemed like an impossible mountain to climb. "I will donate the amount," I announced, to the shock of everyone present. "Consider this an investment in something that truly matters. Eleanor, this is." "I don't even know how to thank you," Clara said, with tears in her eyes. "You don't have to thank me. You need to help me find the perfect property for the project." In the following weeks, I immersed myself in the project with all my energy. I helped select and purchase a suitable building, implemented efficient administrative systems, and even began teaching basic entrepreneurship classes to the most advanced students in the literacy program. During one of my classes, I noticed an older woman, probably in her early 60s, who took meticulous notes and asked insightful questions about how to turn her sewing skills into a small business. "Maria Sanchez has an incredible talent," Clara commented, when I asked about her after class. "She makes beautiful clothes, but she never had the courage or the knowledge to turn it into a business. She raised 4 children alone, working as a cleaner. Now that they're all grown, she wants to fulfill her dream." I began to pay special attention to Maria, helping her develop a business plan, price her creations properly, and understand basic marketing concepts. Her enthusiasm and determination reminded me of myself decades ago when I started my company. One day, as I was explaining to her how to calculate production costs, a thought occurred to me. "Maria, have you ever thought about expanding beyond custom sewing? Maybe creating a small collection that could be produced on a larger scale?" Her eyes lit up. "I've always dreamed of that, Miss Vance. I have so many drawings saved, designs I've created over the years, but I never had the capital to buy fabric in bulk or hire helpers. What if I offered you an initial investment, a small loan to get started? You would do that?" She seemed incredulous. "It wouldn't be a traditional loan. It would be more of an investment. I would provide the seed capital, and in return, I would have a small stake in your business. But you would maintain creative and administrative control. In the following days, we developed a detailed plan together. With my investment, Maria could rent a small workshop, buy industrial sewing machines, hire 2 assistants, also students from the literacy project, and produce her first collection. When Ryan found out about this project through Clara, he offered to help with the brand identity and the design of the workshop space. I accepted his offer, seeing it as an opportunity to continue rebuilding our relationship on neutral ground, focused on something bigger than ourselves. Ryan worked with impressive dedication. He created an elegant yet accessible visual identity for Maria's business. He designed a functional and attractive layout for the workshop, and he even helped set up a simple website to showcase the products. "You have a talent for this," I commented one day as we looked at the results of his work together. "I always knew you were smart, but I never imagined you had this creative streak." "Me neither," he replied, with a shy smile. "I guess I never had the space to discover it. I was too busy trying to be what I thought others expected of me." "And what did you think I expected of you, Ryan?" He thought for a few moments before answering. "I thought you expected me to be a successful businessman, like Dad, to take over the company eventually, to multiply the family fortune. In reality, it was what I expected of myself. I never considered other possibilities." "Do you know what I really expected?" I asked gently. "For you to be happy, for you to find something you loved to do, that gave meaning to your life. Something that made you feel fulfilled, regardless of the money involved." "I think I'm finding that now," he said, looking around the workshop he had helped create. "A little late, maybe, but I'm finding it." 3 months later, we organized a launch event for Maria's brand. The small workshop was unrecognizable, transformed into an elegant and welcoming showroom space. Her creations, dresses, blouses, and skirts with influences from Mexican folk culture, but with contemporary cuts, were beautifully displayed. We invited people from the Literacy Project, friends, potential clients, and some local journalists. To my surprise, Bernard also showed up, having come specially from France for the event. "You never cease to amaze me, Eleanor," he said, kissing my cheek in the European way. "The last time we spoke, you were just starting to get involved with the Literacy Project. Now you're incubating new businesses. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? By the way, I want you to meet my son, Ryan. He was the one who created the entire visual identity and the design of the space." I saw Bernard's cautious gaze. He knew the whole story of Ryan's betrayal, but, like the gentleman he was, he extended his hand cordially. "A pleasure to meet you. Your mother has spoken a lot about you." "I hope it wasn't all terrible," Ryan replied with a self-deprecating smile. "The most recent stories have been quite positive," Bernard assured him. "The event was a complete success. Maria sold almost all the pieces from her first collection. She received orders for the coming weeks, and even interest from a boutique that wanted to sell her creations. At the end of the night, when only the closest friends remained, Maria approached me with teary eyes. "Miss Vance, I never imagined that at 63 years old I would be realizing my life's dream. You gave me more than money. You gave me the confidence to believe I could do it. You always could, Maria. You just needed the right opportunity." I looked around and saw Ryan chatting animatedly with Bernard about French design, Clara organizing the final details with the team, Maria's assistants proudly showing their work to the remaining guests. I felt a deep sense of purpose and connection. This was true wealth. Not the millions in my bank account, not the properties or investments, but the ability to create something meaningful, to make a difference in other people's lives, to build bridges where before there were only chasms. 4 years passed since the poisoning attempt. My life changed in ways I could never have imagined. The Literacy Project grew and expanded to 3 different units. Maria's business prospered, inspiring other women to follow similar paths. We created an incubator for small, women-led businesses, offering not only capital, but mentorship and ongoing support. Ryan found his way as an interior designer, specializing in commercial spaces for small businesses. We worked together occasionally on foundation projects, our relationship now based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. We never mentioned Chloe again, although we learned from common sources that her second marriage had ended as quickly as it began, leaving her once again in search of another financial target. Bernard and I continued our transatlantic friendship, visiting each other regularly, sharing experiences and stories. It wasn't a romance in the traditional sense, but a deep connection between two people who had lived long enough to value authenticity above all else. On my 74th birthday, I hosted an intimate dinner at my house by the sea. Ryan was there, along with Bernard, Clara, Maria, and a few other close friends I had made over the past few years. Looking at that table, at those people who had become my chosen family, I felt immense gratitude. Life had dealt me a harsh blow, but I had transformed that pain into something bigger than myself. And in the process, I regained not only my son, but also a new version of myself, stronger, wiser, more compassionate. When I think about that night of the party, when I saw Chloe adding poison to my champagne glass, I no longer feel just anger or sadness. I feel a strange gratitude. That terrible moment forced me to see the truth, to make necessary changes, to find a new purpose. Sometimes we need to lose something valuable to discover what truly matters. In my case, I almost lost my life, only to find a completely new way of living it. At the end of each day, when I sit on my terrace watching the sunset over the ocean, I am thankful for every moment, every experience, every lesson, even the most painful ones. Because at 74, I finally understood that life isn't about accumulating wealth or avoiding pain. It's about transforming every experience, even the most bitter ones, into something that can benefit not only ourselves, but everyone around us. And that, perhaps, is the sweetest revenge of all. Not to destroy those who tried to destroy us, but to use their betrayal as fuel to build something better, something more meaningful, something that endures beyond ourselves. That night, after the birthday dinner, when everyone else had left, Ryan stayed to help with the cleanup. As we washed dishes side by side, a simple ritual we would never have shared in our previous life, he said something that stuck in my memory. "You know, Mom, losing all that money was the best thing that could have happened to me. For the first time in my life, I know who I am without the things I owned. And I like this person better." I smiled, handing him a plate to dry. "I like this person better too, son." It was a second chance that neither of us expected, born from the ashes of a betrayal that almost cost me my life. Proof that even in the darkest moments, there is the possibility of redemption, of transformation, of a new beginning.